Hi, I'm Greg Dell with Attorneys Dell & Schaefer, and today I'm here with Attorney Cesar Gavidia, and we're going to discuss Trustmark, who goes by the company name of Trustmark Benefits. Their website is actually trustmarkbenefits.com, and I'm clarifying that because there's also a Trustmark Advisors that's out there that isn't them. And basically, Trustmark is interesting because, as you know, Cesar, they are a disability insurance company that also does some third-party administration because they took over some very old disability insurance policies from companies such as Continental and many others that we've seen over the years. But Trustmark also offers other types of insurance products like critical illness policies, cancer policies, and some short-term disability policies, as well as unique long-term disability insurance products. So today I want to talk about our experience in working with Trustmark and all the claims we've seen with them, their process for going over claims, how they handle claim denials, as well as we'll review one of the recent lawsuits that we know that's come about from Trustmark. So let's get in first and talk about your experience and views of a claim that's being handled by Trustmark versus, say, another company's type work on Trustmark.
Yeah, well, Trustmark is really hands-on in terms of how they handle their claims. In other words, once you get from, and it's not a very large group of people over there handling it, most of them have a lot of experience in this area of disability insurance and in these unique disability policies, whether it's a Trustmark policy or, like you said, one of the other products like Continental Assurance or someone like that. They're really familiar with the terms and conditions and a lot of these specific own occupation policies, and even very familiar with dealing with the clientele that usually buys these policies, like your dentists, endodontists, periodontists, chiropractors, physicians, and other professionals like that.
Right, small business owners.
Sure.
And I would say for at least the past 15, 20 years, the employees of Trustmark have been coming to our office, meeting with clients, for doing interviews, working hand in hand with us on their claim, whether it's been our clients that are on claim already and we manage those claims, or it's a situation where someone's been denied and then we get involved in the claim with Trustmark on that side. But let's talk about our experience in the normal process of how Trustmark handles their claims, because it's different than these bigger companies.
Yeah, it is different. So from the time that you submit your claim forms to Trustmark, you inform them and you notice them of your claim, you can immediately expect that they're going to ask for a lot of documentation from you, especially if you're a business owner or a dentist or any sort of physician where you have to keep these code records or financial statements, tax returns. You're going to be getting a request for years and years of this documentation, because one of the things they're going to do is verify your occupational duties through your coding and your billing. They're going to verify the income you were earning and what type of trends that may have been going on with your business the past few years, and then up to this point where you're now filing for disability. And then if you sell your business or sell your practice, one of the things they're going to immediately ask for is the purchase sale agreement. And that happens with a lot of disability claims. As soon as someone sells, they think that that's the time when they need to reach out to a disability lawyer or to Trustmark to inform them they have a disability claim, when in some cases you should already have gotten the process started.
Okay. What about this, what we've experienced all the time? They have different claim reps, and many times we've had claim reps come to our office. And what's the purpose of that meeting, and why have we done so many of those interviews on behalf of our clients?
What they'll often tell you is that it's a fact-finding meeting, or just to kind of give you an update and a status, and to explain kind of where they are in the whole claim review process. They'll most likely tell you, we've done a medical review, or we've had your records reviewed by one of our in-house physician consultants, and this is where they think you may either have a claim with a compensable claim for partial disability, or perhaps a claim for total disability. But they'll come to you with an explanation of what they're doing, where they are, and what their thoughts generally are about your disability claim.
Right, and I think because they have a much smaller caseload that they like to be more hands-on, so they still run it more like a mom and pop shop as opposed to not handling 100 claims per a claims analyst. And so periodically they want to visit with a claimant, they want to inquire as to what's going on with them, they do a detailed medical file review of what's going on, and then they try to lay out see if there's anything inconsistent. Possibly, they're running video surveillance at that point. Talk about why they're doing video surveillance.
Well, because when they come and speak with you, they may ask you to verify certain limitations that you've held out in some of these forms, or maybe some of the restrictions that your doctor's placed on you. And if you tell them, well, I only do some limited driving. I can't drive because of the pain I'm in. And, if I drive 20 minutes at the most. But then they have you running errands for 3 hours and driving from point A to point B, or going to visit, your great aunt, 2 hours away.
Right.
And it's inconsistent with the things that you've been telling them. Or if you tell them, well, I used to, go to with my friends and play golf, and I don't do that anymore. But then on that rare chance that you went out and played a round of golf because you were feeling okay, haven't done it in 6 months, but that happens to be the week they're doing surveillance, they've got you playing golf, and they immediately think that you're lying.
Right. So more often than not, I find the employees they have they're nice people, and they're going to do their homework, so you really need to be prepared. And if you don't tell them the truth, they're going to catch you.
Oh yeah.
Basically is what it's about. Talk for a minute about, on many of the claims, even if they're undisputed claims, about the types of settlements and what we mean by a settlement that we've been able to achieve on many claims with Trustmark.
Well, in most cases, if they approach someone about a settlement, it doesn't always have to be someone who's been receiving benefits, but sometimes it is, and they may approach about a lump sum settlement. In other words, to buy out this future stream of benefits, which they acknowledge they likely have liability for. In other cases, they may approach you before they've even made a decision on your claim to ask you, or to maybe even just test the waters in terms of your idea or thoughts on potentially settling out with them, and avoiding all this trouble of going through medical reviews and updates and all of this stuff. So they may make it sound like it's this great thing, but again, it's maybe a great deal for them, because they're going to be buying you out at a huge discount compared to what they'd be paying out over the course of your claim potentially. Right.
So whether or not a Trustmark buyout makes sense is something that we could obviously discuss with a potential and look at the pros and cons of those. But sometimes they do make sense. It all depends on the life situation of the claimant, and obviously the amount of money that's being...
And the case. And the facts of the case.
So we don't see a ton of Trustmark litigation, and often Trustmark is named as either the entity that took over the claim, but there's usually an underlying initial policy, and now in more recent time with them selling their own policies, you'll see Trustmark on their own. But I know in preparation for today, I asked you to look back at one of the more recent cases, which I think you found going on in California, which kind of gives an example of some of the conduct, similar to what we've mentioned, that a person could expect. But could you briefly discuss that case and how that's something that someone should anticipate?
Sure. Well, the case involved an endodontist who went out on disability, and at the point that he went out on disability, he also sold his practice. He actually sold his practice and then contacted the disability insurer to tell them, I've sold my practice because of these medical issues I'm having. I cannot continue to practice endodontics, and I'm totally disabled. I want to submit my claim. He submits his claim forms. Trustmark receives everything. They start reviewing everything, and months go by, which generally, they're acquiring documentation, they're having it reviewed by their medical consultant. But about 4 or 5 months into the claim process, they reach out to the endodontist and they ask him if he'd be interested in possibly having this interview with one of their field agents. He complied. The field agent came down and began an interview with him, okay? And the interview started off with, your usual, not anything that's all that dangerous and all that particularly complex.
Right.
But then they started getting into their thoughts about the claim, and that one of their medical reviewers didn't really see where there was a claim for total disability, and that there was an issue there for them, and that they may not necessarily be finding that he's totally disabled. They had an issue with the MRIs, and that there wasn't necessarily any tremendous change between MRIs that he had before and current MRIs. And they started getting into objective versus subjective things, which is a common area of dispute with disability insurers. So what ended up happening was...
Were they paying them? Did they ever pay them?
No, they weren't paying.
They weren't paying
They
them.
weren't
Okay.
paying at all. In some cases, they may pay,
Right.
but in this case, they weren't paying any, not even under reservation of rights.
Right.
So the field agent who came down and started going through all of the claim status with the endodontist had explained that there may be other ways to resolve this. And one of the things that they discussed with him was potentially, settling this,
Right.
or resolving it.
Even before he was on claim.
Even before he was on claim. It was something he wasn't really interested in. He felt that kind of the overall sense he was getting of this meeting was that they were denying his claim.
Right. Which is where they were probably leaning.
Which is where they were probably leaning.
Right.
He agreed that, look, he asked the field agent, when do you think the review will be completed? They weren't sure. They're still under review. There's still some other things they need to request and ask for. And they left it at that. The field agent goes back. The endodontist, continues submitting information, continues waiting. And then they ask for an IME, an independent medical exam.
Which they have a right to do.
Which they have a right to do. They also sent him a letter that said basically, it's our medical doctor's opinion that you're not totally disabled. We're still reviewing. We may need some more information, or we need some more information. We'd like you to see this IME. The doctor files a lawsuit at that point. He hires counsel, and they file a lawsuit. And the way this ended up with a decision in federal court basically dismissing the lawsuit was over the question of whether Trustmark had made a final decision, essentially putting it in breach of contract.
Right. And what did the court end up ruling?
The court ended up ruling that they had not breached the contract and that they hadn't actually finished their review. They left it open-ended, regardless of what they may have been implying.
And the court basically told Trustmark, go back and finish your review?
That wasn't necessarily what I got out of the case. Mm-hmm. The case was actually settled soon after that.
Oh, okay.
So I saw a notice of settlement
okay.
in the filings. But that may have been one of the things that they would have had to do, was perhaps complete their review.
Right. What was dangerous about that, and we weren't the lawyers on that case, is that it's very dangerous to file a lawsuit when an insurance company is requesting an independent medical exam because of the fact that it's what's called a condition precedent to coverage, that you have to comply with the terms of the policy. So the claimant is very lucky to say that he was basically withdrew his right to any benefits or lost his right to any benefits because he didn't comply with the condition to coverage, which is similar to saying you have to pay your premiums. That's a condition. If you don't pay, you don't have your coverage. Well, also, if you don't comply and go to an IME exam, then you don't have coverage. So it didn't seem like that came up that much as an argument in this thing, but from what we saw on the outside, again, we weren't in there, but it was interesting to see that the conduct and behavior was the same thing that we always experienced for years with Trustmark, and maybe due to the experience of his lawyer, whoever it was, they might have jumped the gun a little bit, too close in that case.
I think so, but I actually looked at the time period that went by between the time that he filed his claim, the time that he ended up filing the lawsuit, and it was about 6 months. So I mean, his claim was basically in review for 6 months, and to me, and to someone I'm sure that is struggling through a period of disability where they don't have any income coming in, 6 months is a long period of time to not go without any income.
So it would be reasonable to file at that point if they weren't getting a response out of Trustmark. So there's so many stories with Trustmark and so many different policies and claims that we've seen. So no matter what stage you're at with your claim with Trustmark, we recommend that you send us a copy of your policy, send us a status letter if you have one. Even if you're just applying, then just send us the policy. Best way to contact us is either give us a call, contact us through the free consultation form on our website. We're always going to offer you a free consultation. We help clients all over the country, as our cases have been everywhere, as you know, and we appreciate you considering us and look forward to the opportunity to speak with you.